Most NBA players have been called overrated at least once in their careers. But which of these players actually deserve this label? Well, today, I'm going to be giving my list for the top 10 most overrated NBA players of all time. Before I get into this, let me just make this very clear. Overrated does not equal bad. There will be some all-time legends on this list, and even top 10 players ever. And this is not to discredit any of their accomplishments and what they did in their careers. It's simply because of what people rate them, and people make it seem like they are a lot better than they actually are. But enough stalling, let's get into the list. Number 10, Kawhi Leonard. This one is going to make some people very mad, but it's time to be real. Kawhi is a all-time great. After 2 finals MVPs and all around just being a great player, he deserves high praise for his achievements. But Kawhi also may just be the most inconsistent superstar in NBA history. With the amount of games that Kawhi has missed these past few seasons, it makes you question, does this guy even play basketball anymore? If you were to remove the one season that he was with the Toronto Raptors, a lot of the conversations people have had about him now would never happen. And I know that's not fair because it did happen, and he did have one of the best playoff runs ever, but we are talking about his legacy here. And his legacy right now is a player who can't stay healthy, and it seems like he doesn't take his job as an NBA player seriously enough. But you can't deny the guy's a legend, which is why I have him at the number 10 slot. Number 9, Russell Westbrook. This one hurts for me personally. For years, I've been a person who defends Westbrook, and I've always wanted to see the best from him. But there is no more denying that Westbrook has gotten overrated, especially by his diehard fans. Passionate Russell Westbrook fans will convince you that he is the second coming of Kobe Bryant. Over the past few seasons, he's been shipped out to different team after different team, but people are pretty vocal about how Westbrook has fallen off and that he's overrated today. But what people don't want to talk about is how Westbrook has been overrated his entire career. Without Kevin Durant, he has virtually accomplished nothing in the playoffs whatsoever. The stats are cool, the triple doubles were cool, but he did that sacrificing the ability to win when it matters. And even with Kevin Durant, as much as people hate the move that he made when he left OKC, a big reason he left is because his co-star didn't do what he needed to do when it mattered. His selfishness in games costed them so many opportunities, and I feel like Durant's move overshadows a lot of the flaws with Westbrook, even in his prime. Number 8, Anthony Davis. This one I do not feel bad at all about. I know I called Kawhi Leonard inconsistent, but Anthony Davis is probably the most inconsistent star player we have ever seen. He is the definition of somebody who will give you 30 and 15 on one day and then barely score the next game. When Anthony Davis is at his best, I understand why people talk about him so highly. A prime, healthy Anthony Davis has an argument for a top 10 player in the NBA today. But come on, how often are we actually seeing a healthy, ready-to-go AD? Besides a good game every now and then, the last time we saw the AD we know is that good was in the bubble. Anthony Davis in the bubble was on a whole other level, and he was a big reason they were able to win that championship. But with all the potential he has, there is no reason Anthony Davis should only have one championship, especially one he wouldn't have gotten without LeBron James. Who knows, maybe this season he makes a comeback and stays healthy enough to win his second and prove his spot all time. But as of right now, the guy just cannot stay healthy and he's gotten overrated. Number 7, Allen Iverson. Now, before you run to the comments and tell me how great Allen Iverson was, please remember what I said at the very beginning of this video. Overrated does not equal bad. Allen Iverson is a legend and one of my favorite players of all time. Anybody who enjoys basketball can watch Allen Iverson send his opponent into an abyss with one crossover and be amazed. But the same people who are about to leave a comment defending Allen Iverson are the same people that make him overrated. Iverson is an icon and possibly one of the most influential players ever, but these do not help his argument when it comes to his career as an NBA player. He led his team to the finals once, but was never able to actually win a championship. You can say it was because he didn't have help around him on the 76ers, which is fair, but even when he got traded to the Nuggets with one of the best players in the NBA at the time, Carmelo Anthony, they still weren't able to win because Iverson and Melo were so ball dominant. In its prime, Iverson was a pretty selfish player, and it never translated into winning games. He couldn't guard anybody, only being around 6'1", and he was easily exploited by teams. And the best thing to come out of his career is a really cool highlight tape. I love Allen Iverson, and what he did for the game was amazing, and likely won't ever be repeated again. But to put Iverson even as a top 30 player is generous. Number 6, Reggie Miller. Reggie would normally be a lot higher on this list, but it seems like people today kind of realize how overrated he is. Reggie Miller is one of the best three-point shooters ever, a guy who played with the Pacers his entire career, and he had a game where he went off on the Knicks and did the infamous choking sign to Spike Lee. And that is literally where Reggie Miller's accomplishments end. When talking about him as a star player, which is what he was, Reggie was one of the biggest underperformers ever. He consistently shrunk in the playoffs, and even in the playoff series against the Knicks that's so famous and so popular, they lost the series. Like, the Pacers ended up losing, but nobody wants to talk about that. In his 18-year career, he did nothing of significance when it comes to actually winning anything. People just know how he was a great three-point shooter, and they know the whole choke sign, so they assume that he's this all-time legend. And in case you weren't aware, he is not. And I'm not apologizing for this one either. If you gotta defend a player who got dropped off in the first round every single year, you're the problem. Number 5, Larry Bird. Alright, here we go. Let's say it again. Overrated does not equal bad. Overrated does not equal bad. Larry Bird has a very strong argument for being a top 10 player of all time. And if Larry Bird didn't have the most insane, die-hard fans, he would not be overrated. But unfortunately, he does. If you just listen to how people talk about Larry Bird without ever seeing him play or read into any of his stats, you would think he was the greatest three-point shooter ever. And that is just not true. The volume he shot threes and his accuracy just does not hold up with majority of the great three-point shooters in NBA history. Even the people who consider him a top 10 player, I just don't see how you can put him over people like Tim Duncan, Hakeem Olajuwon, Shaquille O'Neal, and even Steph Curry at this point. For those that do have Larry Bird as a top 10 player, cool. I see the argument and I understand why, but the fact that it's debatable just shows how overrated he is. Nobody's questioning Tim Duncan's stance as a top 10 player, or even his rival Magic Johnson's place as a top 5 player. I know his back injuries also set him back from accomplishing a lot more than he did, but that doesn't change his legacy today. Number 4, John Stockton. John Stockton is the all-time leader in assists and steals, and considered by many to be one of the greatest point guards ever. But besides those achievements, he really has nothing else to show for his career. He was teamed up with Carmelo for pretty much his entire career, and that's a big reason he racked up as many assists as he did, which doesn't get talked about as much as it should. He was a solid point guard, but nothing we haven't seen time and time again before and after him. The Utah Jazz had a great system in the 90s between Malone and Stockton, and one of the most unstoppable pick and rolls ever. But a big majority of their success is all because of Karl Malone. And even with the system they had, they were still never able to win a championship together. People love to throw the blame on Karl Malone, which I'm not going to dispute because he's a terrible human being. But when you really dissect why the Jazz failed time and time again and never won a championship, a lot of it comes from John Stockton not being as good as a lot of people think. Number 3, Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt Chamberlain is easily the greatest player that is going to make this list. But Wilt may also just be the most overrated. Just because of how much of a legend he actually is, it didn't seem fair to put him any higher than this, but Wilt Chamberlain has got to be on this list because of how criminally overrated he has gotten. Wilt Chamberlain has some of the most impressive statistical achievements ever, scoring 100 points in one game, averaging 50 points for an entire season, leading the league in assists one year. His stats are crazy, but Wilt Chamberlain falls under the same Russell Westbrook effect. His stats never translated into winning basketball. Every year, he would dominate the stats because he was so much bigger and stronger than everybody else. And then when it came time for the finals, he was getting dropped off by Bill Russell and the Celtics every year. And you would think it'd be very obvious that Bill Russell ranks way higher than Wilt Chamberlain, but no, some people actually rank Wilt over Bill Russell. People hate when you compare players from different eras, but in this situation, they literally played in the same era at the same position. Bill Russell won 11 championships and Wilt Chamberlain has 2. I know people are going to say rings don't mean everything when it comes to these debates, but at some point it's got to mean something. Averaging 50 and dropping 100 is cool, but when it results in losing every single year, what does it really mean? Number 2, Tracy McGrady. T-Mac is similar to Allen Iverson in the sense that he's a player that people love to root for. If you just watch his highlights, you would think he's one of the greatest players ever. Tracy McGrady was literally a 6'8" Kobe Bryant. And that's not a quote from me, that is a quote from Kobe Bryant himself. But when you look at his success in the playoffs and in his career, it gets pretty rough. Tracy McGrady, while playing, never made it out of the first round one time. He would either miss the playoffs completely or lose in the very first round. Injuries definitely set him back, but majority of the time it was just him underperforming in big moments. He had potential to be an all-time great, and for whatever reason he was just never able to be what everybody expected from him. Even when you just take him as a player, yes, he's one of the best of all time, but the people who rank him even top 50 is pretty insane. Especially when he had help around him on the Raptors and the Magic and the Rockets. More help than majority of NBA stars have to win them championships. T-Mac has an argument for being the biggest underachiever of all time, and because of how he's talked about today and how little he actually did, he ranks number 2. Now, on to the most overrated player in NBA history, in my opinion, at number 1, Carmelo Anthony. Carmelo Anthony had quite possibly the most disappointing career from any star player ever, and it is 100% because of his actions and how he played. Melo is similar to T-Mac in the sense that they both barely ever made it out of the first round, but T-Mac at least had an excuse with him going through as many injuries as he did. Melo was just a player who consistently made his teams worse. From when he was playing with the Denver Nuggets, to the New York Knicks, to every team after, all he cared about was dropping 30. He cared more about having a good scoring game and getting his 30 points than actually winning the game, which was literally confirmed by his old teammate Chauncey Billups. He was supposed to be the guy that finally helps the Knicks win, and he was just never that. Even in the point in time where he had no teams to go to and was almost out of the NBA, everybody loved to feel bad for him and say that he deserves a spot, and it's sad to say, but it was because he did nothing for teams. He was a ball hog, he always put up empty stats, and he dragged his teams down. And people will still act like he was just this amazing player who just didn't have the tools to win, but he always had help to win. He just never put his team first, and it resulted in him having 0 championships to show for his accomplishments. And it leaves Carmelo Anthony as the most overrated player of all time. Let me know what you guys think. I have respect for all the players on the list, and this was strictly based off of how fans rate these players. But that's all I've got for today. Thank you all for watching, and with that being said, I'm out of here, and I'll see you on the next one.